My name is Barbara Rose. I'm an art historian, and I was involved in the early years of E.A.T. I went with E.A.T. and Billy Kluver and the group to Osaka, Japan for Expo 70, but I was really literally there, I think the day E.A.T. was born, because Bob Rauschenberg was a very close friend of mine, and he had a piece. Bob was interested. Bob was really a motivating force, and of course it was his collaboration with Billy that launches all of this. And he had a piece called Oracle. It was a sculpture, and he wanted it to move. He wanted it, and he wanted it to have sound. So at first he called in Jean Tingley, who was a friend of ours, and Jean was able to make it move, but he couldn't wire it for sound because he was a kinetic artist. So then Bob asked Billy about making Oracle also a sound piece, and Bob was very interested in the conception of time, and he wanted the visual art to incorporate this conception of the fourth dimension, which is time, and that's how it started. And of course, there had been earlier in the history of art attempts to incorporate technology. Of course, a number of artists like Man Ray and Duchamp and Hans Richter used film, which after all, technological art, and others used projections. But you know, these were more ideas in their infancy, which didn't have the means or the know-how or whatever, or even the technology to go beyond that. Bob wanted to make art in some way, to use technology as a means. But beyond that, he wanted to use art and technology to change society. And that's why he started Rauschenberg Overseas Exchange, and he traveled around the world using technology in these, you know, really out of the way primitive places to try to change these places. And for example, he would make a video in one culture, take it to another, and to teach people how to do things even as simple as, you know, milking cows or whatever it was that, you know, one primitive village needed that they could learn from someplace else, like the Indians in India could learn from the Chileans, who could learn from, you know, and he went all the way, all around the world. But that idea of social change was very vital to the ethos of E.A.T. And so what we did when we went to Japan was to try to really shake up Japan. So I was put in charge by Billy of the publications and all the contracts. And then, of course, we're collaborating with Pepsi Cola. And then one day they wake up and they realize that, you know, we've built this pavilion and it has all these fabulous possibilities, and they hate it. They don't understand it. And it's like, we thought this was going to be a discotheque. And Billy said, no, in the future, there'll be no discotheques. What I think we achieved was memorable, and there are, you know, books about it. And it was a wonderful experience, because there was a craziness about it, because it was also very utopian politically. So you got up in the morning, and what you did was you thought, now, what is there to do today that only I can do, that I should go and do this? And that's how you decided what you were going to do that day. And it somehow worked. You know, everybody just contributed to this utopian community with very, very, very smart people involved in creating what was the closest thing to a Gesamtkunstwerk, a total work of art, that one can imagine, because it was an instrument in and of itself that could be used as an instrument and would have performances in it or music or something like that. But it was very, very sophisticated on a technical level. And the things were like magic. You know, there were things floating in the air, and there was a music system that traveled 360 degrees. And it was, you know, it was an extraordinary achievement. And I read somewhere the number of patents that were generated, and there were hundreds. And that in and of itself, I think, shows you what could be done. I think everyone benefits from collaborating. You know, your mind expands, your capacity expands, and you can invent new forms. Because if you take you know, what C.P. Snow used to call the two cultures, science and art, and you integrate them and you have collaborations in that area, you're going to come up with something really important. You have to have very far-sighted CEOs who can imagine that there may be profit to be made in the future through patents generated through the interaction of artists and scientists. And artists, you know, think differently. They really do. They just have a different way of thinking. And we can use that way of thinking, which is about experimenting and about, you know, what science is really about, which is experimentation and investigation and, you know, solving problems. That's what science does. But artists have these open minds where they're willing to do things that nobody has thought of before. I guess it's heartening to find anybody who's willing to pick up the threads of what was once a very optimistic and energetic concept